Hello everyone, this is Mr. Jackson, and today we are going to be going into our last part for our nervous system concept. These are the final notes that we're going to have that build our understanding or contribute to doing so on the nervous system. We've been going back to this diagram, this graphic organizer, the entire concept, right? So we've gone back to it time and time again because it's a very, very helpful way to understand the ways in which the nervous system is divided based on the parts of the nervous system and what is happening, okay? So we are going to actually jump back up for this last part. We're going to jump back up to the peripheral nervous system, and we're going to actually look at one more aspect of this. It's off to the side. We didn't break it down into any further parts, but we want to go into this sensory or afferent division, specifically as it pertains to the peripheral nervous system, and we're going to see why. We're actually going to be talking today about reflexes, and so these are going to be those really helpful, quick responses, protective responses that we can utilize. And so we want to understand how those are working. They're such a common thing that we utilize, so we want to make sure we don't overlook them in this unit. So we have a variety of sensory receptors, okay? If in our sensory division, we've got these receptors. They're responsible for taking in all of the different type of stimuli from our physical environment, and they will help send them to the brain and help us interpret and respond to those. Okay, so here are the classifications of our different types of receptors. Okay, it's going to all be based off of the type of stimulus that each one is going to be specifically structured to respond to. So we have our mechanoreceptors. These are going to respond specifically to mechanical force. This could be vibration, pressure, stretch, and touch. Okay, so as we go through these, you can think of these as your different sensations that you're able to gather from the physical environment. But touch, force, pressure, anything like this, these are what those mechanoreceptors are really good for taking in and transmitting information for. You have thermoreceptors, okay? Just like little thermometers, they respond to changes in temperature, okay? So they can help respond to anything that's not your body temperature, which is 98.6 degrees on average. They can help respond to any change in environmental temperature. You have photoreceptors. These are sensory receptors specific to light, so they take in light and help to transmit that information to the brain so we can make sense out of what we're seeing in terms of those differences in light. We have chemoreceptors, which are going to specifically be there to respond to different kinds of chemicals, so chemical messengers. Chemoreceptors are the ones that can help translate that information and send it to the central nervous system. And then nociceptors or nociceptors, these are responsible for detecting pain. Okay, so those nociceptors are going to be pain receptors. So a little bit different from touch. Nociceptors are specific to painful stimuli, so things that are going to pose a potential threat. So we have this pathway of the process of taking in information and then delivering some sort of a response. And we should have that pretty well down at this point. We start with a stimulus. It's going to be received by a certain receptor based off of what type of stimulus, if that's touch, light, chemical signals, something, okay? We transmit that through our peripheral nervous system to the spinal cord and possibly also the brain. And this is all within the sensory division, right? This is all about relaying information from the environment to the central nervous system, right? So it's still the sensation aspect of it. We're not delivering a signal yet in terms of what to do about it. So it's all about the sensory side of things right now. But this can also trigger an action potential that will then send signals to the motor division, right? So this process, even though it is going to naturally relay information, it can also trigger another kind of like a secondary action potential that can then actually send motor signals without it having to go all the way up and through the entire process of having a decision made in the brain. And we call these reflexes. Okay, we think of reflexes as automatic reactions to stimuli. So these are good because it's like sometimes we want really, really quick responses that we can act on even quicker than what it might take our spinal cord and our brain and our decision-making centers and then the motor outputs from those. We want it faster than that a lot of times, and that's what reflexes are so useful for. And so these reflexes, they can be innate or what we call intrinsic. These are rapid, predictable motor responses to some sort of a startling stimulus. Okay, so for example, if I were to step on a sharp object, an intrinsic reflex would be that I'm gonna lift my foot away from that really, really quickly because I'll recognize that it's painful. So that's something that's intrinsic. I don't have to really learn that, right? That's just something I'm going to do. It's an innate mechanism in my body. A learned or acquired reflex is something resulting that I have to acquire through practice, repetition, or experiences. Okay, so if I learn when I need to start pressing the brake pedal when I see a stop sign because I'm learning how to drive, that's a reflex that I have to acquire. It's not something that I was born with, like sharp objects hurt, remove yourself from a sharp object. It's more like something that's learned based off of your environmental needs. They're not typically shared innately amongst all humans. Okay? So you have those innate or intrinsic, like ow, remove, and then you have those learned or acquired, like I need to start pushing the brake pedal when I see a red stop sign. And then we're going to finish our conversation on the nervous system by going through the 5 essential components of what is actually happening to make reflexes occur so quickly. They are very highly specific pathways. We call them reflex arcs. It's going to have a receptor, which is the initial site of the stimulus. Again, these are going to be specific to various types of stimuli. Sensory neuron is going to transmit that impulse from the peripheral nervous system wherever it was received to the central nervous system. The integration center is basically going to decode this signal at a synapse or multiple synapses at once. It's going to decode it. It's going to make sense of it. The motor neuron is then going to conduct impulses to whatever effector organ needs to help us respond effectively. And then the effector is the one that's actually going to respond by contracting if it's a muscle cell or secreting a hormone of some kind if it is a gland. And I provided a visual. Again, this is one that we've already seen to an extent. It's represented a little bit differently now. But essentially, if I were to use the common example of pain, sharp object, ouch, like a cactus, if I were to touch a cactus, I have a stimulus you can see here, like one of those sharp, I don't know what you'd call them, stickers on a cactus. But you have these sensory receptors that are going to be specific to pain. Okay, those are those nociceptors that you have here in your integumentary system, your skin tissue. And then that's going to relay that information via a sensory neuron. It's going to pass through a dorsal, which is backside, dorsal root ganglion, which is just this larger collection of cell bodies for these sensory neurons. So you can kind of see a cell body here, big cluster of those would be here. It's going to go into the dorsal or posterior side of the spinal cord. So it's going to enter the spinal cord in through the back. And it's going to relay that information to a relay neuron or an interneuron. This is that integration center that we were talking about. Now, some signals, some sensations are going to be relayed up the spinal cord into the brain, right? That's the ultimate decision-making processor. That's the big control center in our bodies. But if I don't need to necessarily wait around for some sort of like a higher executive's decision, if instead I can just simply go ahead and use something intrinsic or learned and keep it just at that integration center in the spinal cord, I can then go ahead and relay that information to a motor neuron, right, to the dendrite cell body and then out through the ventral portion of your spinal cord, that anterior portion, the front side. So again, as I've come through, I brought this input in through the back and out through the front, through the ventral root, along that motor neuron to muscle tissue that's innervated, that's that effector organ, and the response is that I remove my hand. Okay. One other quick thing here. We have this acknowledgement of white matter and gray matter, right? Whenever you're talking about that internal gray matter, this is typically going to appear darker. That's why we call it gray rather than white. And that's because it's typically going to be comprised of your clusters of interneurons and your axon terminals, right? And so a bunch of cell bodies, axon terminals, and the like. White matter is going to be more of that exterior, it's the transmission portion, where it's going to be more of like your motor neuron and sensory neuron axons, right? Those really long axons. And it's going to appear white because, if you remember, it appears white because it's along those axons, you have these myelin sheaths, right? So they're myelinated, meaning that they have these like coatings of fatty coverings, and that's what ultimately contributes to white matter looking white. It's like where the impulses are actually being sent, and the decision-making portions, those internal portions of your spinal cord, are the gray matter. And then just to give you one more visual here, you can feel free to pause if you'd like more info, but this is just a real world example. Whenever you go to a physician's office and they were to test your reflexes, very common way that they do that is they take this little tool and they whack your patellar ligament to see if it triggers a reflex that would be expected, which is to extend your knee. So you can see that the innervated muscles involved are listed and labeled. On your big body diagram, this is going to be a labeled version of that, same as what you would see exactly as I've represented on that activity. But yeah, you can see exactly what we're talking about here, like where your spinal cord, you got your surrounding white matter here, where you have all of these myelinated axons, your internal gray matter, and the sensory neurons bringing information in through the back, motor information leaving out through the front. And then we can have a reflex response. And so that is going to actually conclude our lecture material for the nervous system. I really hope that you've found most or all of this information helpful and informative and interesting. And we will be moving forward to our sensory organs and our endocrine system. Been talking a lot about that in these slides, and so now we're going to actually look at those more in detail. We will see you at the next one.